Okay, hello, welcome to episode 6 of Programming with Matt. Sorry for this short break, but I've had personal commitments, and so yeah, that's what's going on. What you see me doing here is starting off what we're going to be doing in this episode, which is just creating a heads-up display for the player. And what you see me doing here at the moment is getting rid of the cursor, so that when the cursor's on the screen, it doesn't actually show an image, and that way I can add my own cursor, and I can blend that in with the heads-up display so it looks a little better. This, as you can see, is me editing in the main function. Now what this is when it's setting up the frame, making it so it's setting the cursor up properly before it even starts the game. Otherwise you might end up with like a quick flash on the cursor, which isn't good to see anyway. So what you see me doing here is editing the frame and making a new cursor called blank there that you see. And this is just creating a new image that is obviously no colour in it, so it's completely blank. So yeah, as you see, I've used buffed image at 16 by 16 as it's just a standard size that works. Now what you see me doing is using Cursor Handler, which is a new class I've just created, and what this will do is it will allow me to change the cursor as I wish, and then this way it will allow me to, for example, when you're moving the mouse to the edge of the screen, as you can see there, I can change it to each of the different cursors depending on which edge of the screen you actually move the mouse to, and it points to the direction, which makes the cursor look a bit more dynamic and adds a little bit of polish to the game. That it's very subtle, but it does help the game a lot when it comes to it in the end. As you can see here, I'm just setting up some basics. I've got normal, which is just the basic pointer that you see is the diagonal one. You've got current, which is currently null, and then when you set it up, the current is turned into normal. Tick will just hold the position of the cursor. We have to draw it, and obviously render draws it at that specified position. That's why I had to make the X and the Y variables, as you see above. And to render, now what to render will do is this will do exactly as it says. If to render is true, it will render the mouse, whereas if it's false, it will not. And the way they're set is just based on whether or not the pointer is actually on the screen or it's off of the screen. And this way it will make sure that when you bring the mouse to the edge of the screen, it doesn't set the cursor still sitting there on the edge of the screen. What you see there is as I move the mouse, it was leaving a trail. That's because, as you see from the previous episode, I set it so that the level doesn't constantly re-render, and what you see me doing now is just invalidating another chunk around the cursor, 16 pixels, which isn't a lot, but apparently it's enough that it doesn't work. So as you can see, the player is also messing up a little there as well. So what that is because I'm telling it to invalidate a chunk, and when I first built that function, it wasn't making it possible. The chunk to invalidate wasn't an array list. Now by the chunk to invalidate being an array list, it means I can add things to it, so it can invalidate more than one chunk, as opposed to only invalidating one chunk and then overriding it every time I try and invalidate a new chunk. And obviously I just make sure the chunk to inval size is greater than 0, because if it is 0 then it means there's nothing in it, and as you can see I remove them afterwards, otherwise I'll be constantly invalidating them. It'll make it completely pointless to have the invalidation chunks, as you see pointed out a second ago. What I'm doing now is just to change the validate chunk function so that it adds it instead. I also create a constructor, which you can see here, and what this will allow is so that rather than having to create a chunk and then set each of the variables individually, I can just create the chunk, specifying all 4 variables, and it will set them accordingly. What you see is the mouse still not working, so I go back into the Cursor Handler class and I invalidate a chunk at the top. Now what this will do is this should invalidate a chunk of the cursor previous to the one that I'm now about to draw, so it should completely scribble it out. However, I didn't realise I try and add level.getX, and this way it will add the mouse's X position to the level's X position, and then this way it will figure out what part of the level it actually has to render. As you can see, I'm sort of looking everywhere I can to see where it is going wrong, and because everything I seem to try, it seems to just not work. That one you see a minute ago was slowly getting rid of it as you was drawing. I try and take out the negatives from it, and you can see it works because the level's position is negative, so when I plus it, it becomes the right number, as opposed to when I was setting it as a negative, it was drawing something off screen. Now set cursor, as you see here, and I send it a string, which is the name of the cursor I want to set. Now these will be different ones that will be set by me. Obviously, as you can see, I'm setting them up now. If the name is normal, then it will set the normal. If left arrow, obviously left arrow, and all the others are in exactly the same way. I have to use two equal signs, otherwise it's trying to set name to equal that, as opposed to checking to see if name equals that. And then I will change it to each of the according arrows. I have to set all them up at the top. I've obviously already designed the cursors, I just have to change the image and make sure it chooses the right one. I then have to set when I want the cursor handler to change the cursor. This is done in the level. As you can see, it's done when you move the cursor to a certain part of the screen. For example, as you'll see now, if I move to the right hand of the screen, it will move the cursor to the right arrow. If I move to the left part of the screen, it will move to the left arrow. This is obviously, as I said before, a very subtle thing to do, but it makes it look a bit more polished. As you can see, I'm just looking around, because what's going on is when you move it to the edge, it will set it to left arrow, for example. When you move it back in, it's not setting it back to the normal, it's instead setting it back to left arrow still, and it doesn't look right. See, it looks like it ain't been set up properly, which it hasn't. Now the next thing I do is check to see if the mouse on the screen just on the level. Again, this has a little bit of extra polish, so that if you move your mouse to the edge of the screen, it will move. If you move your mouse off of the screen, you won't keep moving all the time. Obviously this is not a very good thing to see, because it means that when you try and click on something outside of the game screen, you're not actually clicking on it, it's just moving the game over more and more. Next thing I do, as you see a moment ago, is create a class called HUD. Now HUD is obviously HUD, standing for heads up display. So I make a spell button empty, and I also set, as you see, a render function. Now what this is me trying to figure out where on the screen I want to draw the button, and at the moment I don't actually know how many I want to draw, so I'm just drawing one for the moment, just to make sure that everything's working, because the fact is, if I can draw one, I can draw 300, 400, however many I need, which obviously I won't need that many, but you get the point. So what I do now is I'm doing it in 16, so I'm using it in grid function like that, and this just allows me to quickly change it every time. I'll draw a second, because I was happy with the position of it, and I want to start positioning the others. And as you see there we go. As you see, there was 4 drawn, equally spaced, just not centered, and they're still not centered, but they're close enough for me. So what I do now is I change all the minuses to pluses, and you see the buttons are drawn where I like them, because they're not going to be centered anyway. There is going to be a little image on the side that will be separate from the spells, and I want the spells to be centered in them, the gap next to it, as opposed to the whole screen. And what you see now is just me tweaking the numbers a little bit, and I do this quite a lot. I'm still doing this now, just tweaking the numbers to what I like them to be. And as you can see, I've now centered them completely, and there's still a big gap in the middle, which isn't what I like, but you know, it's just what I wanted to do. Now I keep a bigger gap, and so I've gone the wrong way with variables. Change it to 25. As you can see, they're perfectly spaced, and I actually like the look of them. Okay, so that's been part 6 of Programming with Matt. Please check back on Sunday when you see what we're doing then. Okay, thank you for watching.